Higher ed leaders, when it comes to scaled student writing feedback, stop guessing. Get Studiosity. Trusted by colleges, Studiosity has helped students for 20 years with integrity, not corrections. Get your free demo at studiosity.com/ace.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time, EdUp, on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Salustio back with you on another episode. And I got to tell you, this is one of my last episodes before we hit the Christmas holiday. And so happy holidays and Merry Christmas to everyone. This will make much less sense because this episode will probably be released in January. So if I didn't catch you to say happy holidays and Merry Christmas before you heard this, I'm saying it to you now. And I want to say, as we enter 2026, thank you to our amazing listeners that are out there that help sustain this podcast, that I get to see when we do live recordings at higher ed conferences, who come up and go, hey, I listened to your podcast episode with this person or that person. It's just validating, and it keeps us going because, as I like to remind my audience, I record every single day, Monday through Friday, except for major holidays. And I've been doing that for about 4.5, almost 5 years. So to do that every single day, the guests have to be amazing, which they are. And it's an and I have to know that our listeners are getting something out of it, which is the most important part. I will tell you guys this. I truly believe, and you know how I feel, that higher education is the gateway to a better life. And the reason why we do this podcast, as I say again and again, is to boost the message of our colleagues and the work they are doing as loudly and as widely as humanly possible, because not everybody gets the microphone all the time. Sometimes those get the microphone are serving the 1% of the overall higher ed population. We want to know who else is out there doing great work, especially if there's innovative models. And speaking of an innovative model, my co-host looks like he could be stepping out of GQ magazine, number one. And number two, he's never been a co-host of a podcast episode before. So if it goes poorly, I'm going to blame him only. And if it goes great, I take all the credit. That's how it works, ladies and gentlemen. He's Troy Burnett. He is General Manager of North America at Studiosity. Troy, welcome. See, I already messed up your intro, so it can't get any worse than that.
What's going on, Joe? Thanks for having me on. I'm excited. This is my first podcast ever. So I'm with Studiosity. I'm the General Manager for North America. We're a company that's based out of Australia, and we've got global operations, but we're brand new in the U.S. And so my charge is to meet with college and university leadership across the U.S. and Canada, and help partner with these institutions to bring Studiosity on board.
You're already doing great because you didn't do what most brand new guest co-hosts do, which is to say something like, and I'm really excited to interview John today. And I go, wait a minute, I haven't introduced that person yet. So you already passed the first test. We have two guests with us today because why have one when you can have two and make the conversation even better? Let's bring them in one at a time. Ladies and gentlemen, first, he's Chief of Staff at BYU Idaho. He's Rob Garrett. Rob, welcome to the mic. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me today.
We hope you're ready for this, Rob. We're hope
ready.
You're ready. Because I heard the other person who's here with us today said, you better get ready because the fire questions come to you and the easy ones get lobbed to him. We had that conversation before you came on. Ladies and gentlemen, my second guest. He's President Meredith. He is the president of BYU Idaho, and he's here with his colleague, and we're going to have a great conversation. Welcome to the podcast, President Meredith. How are you doing?
Joe, thank you. Merry Christmas to you and Troy, and for everyone listening in January, Happy New Year to you.
Well, look at that. We're already starting off in a great way. What better way to start? And I'm going to ask you both perhaps to comment. And President Meredith, perhaps start with you. And then Rob, if you want to fill in maybe some of the details. Tell us about BYU Idaho, who you serve, and how you serve them.
BYU Idaho is a four-year undergraduate institution in the church education system of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We're only 25 years old. 25 years ago, we transitioned from a 2-year junior college named Rick's College to BYU Idaho. I would say 98% of our students are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We are driven by our mission. We strive to provide a high-quality education at a low cost in an environment that is both fun and aligned with the teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Amazing.
Rob, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I would add that we have a teaching focus faculty at BYU Idaho where our faculty and teachers are focused 100% on what they need to do to help the students progress and learn and grow towards the mission, but also in academic disciplines as well. We also, it's really important for us to focus on real world preparation within our curriculum and efforts and our student employment and activities models as well, all throughout the university. That's one of our other priorities that we have.
And Troy, I'm going to kick it to you in a second, but I want to bring up something because I've had the absolute pleasure of intersecting with some of your colleagues in the church educational system. Dr. Bruce Cush at Ensign College, who was the first college to go down along with BYU Pathway Worldwide, I think the 90-credit bachelor's degree, and Elder Clark Gilbert, who was on recently, that said, you got to get the guys, it was something like this. Let me see if I can do an impression. You got to get the guys at BYU Idaho on. They're doing innovative work. And maybe that's not exact, but it's something.
Oh,
like
that sounds exactly like him, Joe.
Yeah.
You're great. You're a great imitator.
Don't quote me. But innovation was at the core of his message. You know, how did we imagine doing something different? And BYU Idaho was really the manifestation of that, where it's year-long learning. It's, as you said, President Meredith, high quality education at a lower cost, but not getting caught up in some of the bureaucracies that exist in higher education, which, you know, the dance fall spring, and then you just don't go all year round. Can you guys talk to the innovative spirit that BYU Idaho embodies to serve students in a different way?
I would say the innovation, the focus on the innovation is really driven by the history of leadership here. I mean, you mentioned Clark Gilbert, who just has an amazing background with a master's from Stanford, a doctorate from Harvard, and was on the Harvard Business School before he came here. Kim Clark is another example, was dean of the Harvard Business School before he was called by the president of the church to come out and lead BYU Idaho. When Kim Clark was here, he challenged the university with what he called three imperatives. One was to increase quality, two was to decrease cost, and three was to expand the reach. And if you think about those things often work against each other. And so the only way that you can accomplish all three is you have to be innovative. And you mentioned one of those innovations, which is the 3-track calendar. You know, the education system is built on the traditional fall and winter semester. Which leaves, you know, campuses fairly empty and students fairly bored over the summer. We have a 3-track system. A lot of our students will go year-round, and students who don't go year-round are assigned to a track. It could be a fall-winter track, a winter-spring track, a spring-fall track. And so it allows us to utilize the assets we have, which are our buildings and our campus, to use those more fully 12 months out of the year. And it also allows a lot of our students to graduate quicker, which is a challenge in higher education. We talk about 4-year degrees, but not a lot of students graduate in 4 years. But the 3-track system certainly facilitates that. So that's one of the ways that we can maintain high quality while reducing cost, both for the university, but perhaps more importantly for the students that are attending school here.
Rob, anything you want to add to that before we kick it to Troy?
Yeah. So, I think there's always been an element of innovation at both Ricks College and at BYU Idaho. And I think when Gordon B. Hinckley, who was the president of the church at the time, and he's the one who made the announcement and wrote what we call the announcement of the transition to BYU Idaho. He put some of what BYU Idaho needed to be in that document. It's been referred to as our DNA. Like this is what you need to be as a university. And as you read that, like it's going to take innovations to accomplish what's in that announcement. And so we reference that often, and we look at it often. It's still relevant to us today. And just quickly with the 3-track system, as Rick's college, it was a private junior college, and we were denying a lot of people. The access just wasn't there. Upwards of 50% of those who applied. Before BYU Idaho, when we were still Rick's, there was one year, just to give you an example, there was one year where we admitted the very obvious ones that academically would qualify. And then there were some requirement lines that we had, and those who didn't meet those requirements were denied. But there was a big middle. And the way the admissions office approached that was just by randomly selecting people until they got to the number. Now we knew, looking back, that's not innovative, right? That's not the way to do it. And so we needed something different. We needed a completely different structure to serve the numbers of students who wanted to come here. And that's where the 3-track system came, because we realized if we utilized the campus, utilized faculty, utilized all the resources all year long, then we would be able to admit those students and serve them.
Legendary.
All right, Troy, you're on.
Hey, so I have a question for President Meredith. You know, it strikes me that you don't have like this traditional higher ed career path that we see with a lot of university presidents. Certainly not all. I think there's some great examples of university leadership that come from government and business and other industries. Can you talk a little bit about your background and how that shaped your approach to leadership there at the university?
Sure, thanks. So my background is business. I started my career at GE Capital back in the day, that when GE was a big successful company. Have an MBA from the University of Chicago. Spent some time consulting with the Boston Consulting Group, and then spent most of my career with a company called Assurion, which is in kind of the tech insurance space. And when I received this assignment to come here, it was a surprise, to say the least. I think my background has brought me a couple lenses that I look through in decisions that we make on campus. One is a very intense focus in the business world. We would call it the customer. Here we call it the student. And so we look at things here through the lens of how is it going to affect the student. We do a lot of student listening. We do a lot of student surveys, focus groups, to make sure that we are in touch with what students need and what they want. I think another thing that my background has helped a little bit with is just cost discipline. You know, higher education right now is plagued by spiraling cost. I mean, the amount of student debt that graduates are leaving school with is just staggering. And we, again, looking at this through the eyes of how it affects the student, we are very disciplined about our cost here, so we can keep costs low for the students. 69% of our students graduate with no debt, which we're really happy about. And so I would say, to kind of sum up the answer to your question, I think an intense focus on the student and then secondly, cost discipline are two things that my background is, how that's influenced my experience here. I'd say the other thing is coming in without any preconceived notions has been really helpful. My first 100 days here, I was very intent on going on a listening tour. And I was doing lots of focus groups and meetings with students, faculty, employees, alumni, potential employers. And I think going in with a blank slate, allowed us to look at some things with a fresh perspective. And I think that's been beneficial.
That's awesome. What do you think has surfaced in those listening sessions, and as you kind of have your ear to the ground at the student level, what are some of the main things that are coming up in terms of what matters most to BYU Idaho graduates?
Yeah, I'd say that there's some things that are similar to probably students at any institution of higher education, and some that are different. And I'll start with what's different. We're very mission driven here. We Our mission, and we talk about it all the time, is to develop disciples of Jesus Christ who are leaders in their homes, the church, and their communities. And so that spiritual mission really drives a lot of what we do here. In terms of things that are similar to what students on other campuses may be concerned about, I'd say they're concerned about values, they're concerned about cost, and they're concerned about the ability to get jobs when they graduate. If you look at the challenges that higher education has faced, they've had challenges in all three of those things. And on a lot of campuses, the things that are taught in the classroom don't always match the values of the students and what they hold in their hearts. And I think our spiritual mission, our alignment with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, helps us in that regard. I mean, we have people on this campus who share a faith and want to study with those who share their beliefs and their values, which I think provides a great unity on campus, which is helpful. When it comes to cost, we talked about that. A little bit. We owe this rising generation a more efficient way to provide education. The amount of debt that students are graduating with has humongous repercussions, not only on their lives, but also the way a lot of people are viewing education, because the return doesn't always justify the investment when the investment is so crazy high. We firmly believe, in fact, I think, Joe, at the beginning, you said that higher education was the gateway to a better life. We absolutely believe that. And it's the gateway to a better life in so many different ways, financially, but also, studies
factually. Factually, which is an important designation, because somehow those facts are disputed. I don't know how, but you know better.
Well, and sometimes those facts, show up in salaries and those types of things. But it also, the benefit also shows up in community and civic engagement, critical thinking. And again, going back to kind of our spiritual mission, we believe the glory of God is intelligence, and there's just a higher and holier purpose for studying. But so there's the cost piece, and then the last one is we have to. We have to ensure that our graduates are leaving here with a promise of good paying jobs. Now, we want people to leave here with broad-based kind of liberal arts education, critical thinkers, and those types of things. But we've got to prepare them for the workforce as well. There is nothing noble about our graduates leaving enlightened but unemployed. And we can do both. It doesn't have to be a choice. I mean, we can still hold on to that, kind of traditional model of education being about enlightenment, as well as helping them prepare to be employed and great contributors in the workforce.
May I add something about the learning models? Yeah. More specific to BYU Idaho. Not only did President Meredith visit with people on campus, but he also visited with people off campus. And one thing that was clear is that there was a brand gap at BYU Idaho, where there's the reality of the amazing experience here, but even within the church, not everyone understood that. In fact, the perception was much lower than the reality of what happened here. And so we worked on telling the story. We worked on, building activities. We even worked with consulting groups to help us. And we worked on, the BYU Idaho, even like identity and branding and, unity, like feeling something when you come here. All of that, which was already here in many ways, but it just wasn't understood unless there was a connection to BYU Idaho. And so that's something we really worked on. And another thing I would say is it was clear what the goals of the institution needed to be after those learning sessions. The first one was enrollment. We saw a decline like a lot of other higher education institutions did post-COVID. Before COVID, we saw 20 years of growth. And so that was a new world for us. And so we had to figure out, okay, what do we got to do different to turn that around? We've seen some success there to the point where, that's almost kind of going back into our normal operations and not as an institutional goal. But the other ones that we're looking at that became clear was our first year retention. Another one that we're just figuring out now is increasing graduation rate. And one that we've been working on for a while is job placement, increasing our job placement rates. And so I think those learning models helped us see the brand gap and also helped us see what goals we needed to work on.
I like that that you said that brand gap, which is really interesting, and I wonder how much of it is actually due to the fact that you're so nascent still. I mean, in 25 years and the higher ed, 220 years we've been. Some schools have been there for 1,000 years, and whatever, done things the same way forever. And 25 years is really not a long time.
Yeah.
And did that brand gap exist? And I'm going to wrap this around. Because of the newness? Was it because of the change in name? And how much of that was due to us in higher ed as an industry maybe not telling the story effectively?
I would say all three.
Yeah, I'd say yes.
Yeah, I'd say all three.
I mean, yeah. I think there's a brand gap with higher education in general. Like you said, the kind of the naysayers about higher education right now just leave me scratching my head, and particularly in light of what you referred to as the facts. The facts are very clear that it is even if you just look at it from a financial perspective, there is a return on investment for higher education. So there's been, as we think about just looking at it from BYU Idaho, though, we've needed to tell our story in a more compelling way.
And you don't just have like a couple of students, by the way. You guys are give us the scale. How many students are we talking about BYU Idaho?
Yeah. So because of the 3-track system, not everyone's here at the same time, which is why we use the full semesters. And so when you look at a semester, we're anywhere, we're about this fall semester, we're close to 24,000.
Yeah.
But when you look year round, of everyone who's in the enrollment system, we're closer to 34,000. And so it is a large school, a large population.
Yeah, and I want to bring that up because and Troy, I'm sorry, I'm dominating but I get these thoughts out. The church educational system, I had no idea how large it was.
Yeah.
Elder Gilbert came on and he says, 165,000 students. Oh, by the way, 450,000 in, I forget what he called it, but within each college, there's chapters.
Seminaries and institutes.
Yeah, seminaries and institutes. Yeah.
Yeah. And you go, whoa, the scale is huge. So you're talking between 24 and 30,000, 32,000 students. There's an important story to be told when you're dealing at that level of scale, that we as an industry, and you take that scale and you multiply it out, we as an industry failed to tell that story when the public demanded that we tell it. And that's why the public said, well, this must not have value. Nobody's telling a good story. How do we tell that story better, President Meredith, in your opinion? What do we need to do to bring that love and feeling of higher ed back?
Leaders in higher education, when it comes to scaled student support, stop guessing. Studiosity is globally trusted, used by educators for 20 years to build critical thinking and ownership amongst all students at scale. Studiosity is designed just for colleges, with a proven 4.4x return on retention. It's time for AI to ethically serve the mission of American schools. Ask for your free demo at studiosity.com/ace. Raise your standards for AI in education and protect the value of your degrees with Studiosity.
Yeah, well, I think some of it's kind of grassroots guerrilla warfare. We've got to get out and tell the story. This past weekend, I was in Orange County and San Diego. I spent a lot of weekends on the road, just out telling the story to prospective students and their parents. So I think that's part of it. Yeah, and then the second thing is the alumni. When When I got here 2.5 years ago, we had 0 alumni chapters, and now we have 3. Now we've got 35 alumni chapters, and we've tasked each of those alumni to help us with 3 things: 1, to share our story; 2, to give to fund scholarships for students; and 3, to hire. So I think engaging the alumni, I think, is key to the story going forward. And then the other thing that we've also really leaned into is we have to use the communication mediums that the young people use. So we have multiplied our efforts on social media, and on social media, you've got to convey. You've got to tell lots of stories there. You've got to tell the story of that this is a place that can prepare you for your future. You've got to tell the story about how it helps you grow how education helps you grow as a whole individual. And you got to tell the story that this is a fun place to be. And we've been pretty intentional about using social media to tell those stories. So I think it's guerrilla warfare, using your alumni, and using social media. And you've got to hit on all 3 of those. One without the others is not gonna help address that full brand gap you talked about.
And I think unique to schools, I mean, focus on what's unique to you, like what makes you special. Like, for example, BYU Idaho is in Rexburg, Idaho, and some people may say, well, Rexburg, Idaho, like, what are you doing there? But the truth is, people come from all around the world to vacation, for business trips, whatever. Yellowstone National Park, Jackson Hole, like, people come from around the world to be here, and there's amazing things to do no matter what season it is. And so when he talks about the fun, like, there's even things unique to each school that we can talk about like that, where, hey, you can get this if you come here. And so I think that's part of it too.
Let's go.
Troy, you're up.
So a lot of my work is related to AI. We have an AI-based solution. I'm constantly talking to university leadership about how they're approaching generative AI in their institutions. And look, this is a technology that has the potential to be an incredible blessing to higher education. I think you guys would agree with me. But it also has the risk of becoming a curse if we don't do it the right way. And so I'm curious, looking ahead, what excites you most, President Meredith in particular, about generative AI? And maybe what concerns do you have in approaching this in higher education?
Yeah, the things that excite me the most are the things that benefit the student. You can use AI for lots of reasons. In fact, we were just in a meeting yesterday, and I said to the team, we need to make sure that we are focused on the student. We don't need to be spending a whole lot of time about how to reduce our workforce by 20%. I want us spending time on, 1, how do we enhance learning for the students? 2, how do we prepare students to use AI in their workforce, so that when they graduate from here, that's a tool for them to help them be successful? And then 3, how do we use AI to help students in advising and mentoring and tutoring and those things? When we first started talking about AI, we probably came up with a list of 10 different benefits that we could extract from AI. But we've learned, as we all know, that if we try to do 10 things, we're not going to get any done. But if we really focus on a few things, then our chances for success are much greater. And so we have chosen to really focus on those 3 things, and the student is at the heart of those. One of the ways that we're approaching AI is we're approaching it both from kind of the ground up as well as from the top down. When I say ground up, we're encouraging our faculty and employees to be innovative and entrepreneurial in their use of AI. We want to be careful about putting too many restrictions on them, because when you do that, you often dampen innovation. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is in our leadership meeting. So we have a weekly leadership meeting with the top 45 leaders on campus, and we end every one of those meetings with an AI moment. And the AI
Surprise.
moment is we say, all right, someone share an experience of how you have used AI this week, or how you've seen someone else use AI this week. And so we end the meeting with a little experience on how AI has benefited. The challenge with new technology, and this has always been the case, even before AI, is not knowing what you don't know. And so we want to encourage people to go out and learn and experiment and try things. From kind of the institutional level, there are policies, particularly around data privacy, that we need to be mindful of, and we've got teams that are working on that. But we're trying to work on all those things in a measured way, and we talk about it in terms of fences and roads. If we're not careful, we'll spend all of our time building fences, talking about things that we can't do. And those are things that are important because there are some slippery slopes you can step on. But we need to make sure that we're spending at least equal time talking about what roads we can be building with AI, how it's going to help enhance student learning, prepare them for the workforce, and be an added tool when it comes to advising and mentoring and tutoring and those types of things.
Nailed it.
I was actually reading an article just this morning about AI, and particularly with how it impacts writing.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me of a quote from David McCullough, that historian author. He's the one that wrote like the John Adams biography.
Yeah, for sure.
He said, writing is thinking, and to write well is to think clearly. That's why it's so hard. And so when you think about academic writing, this has traditionally been one of the best ways to assess student thinking and learning. How is BYU Idaho thinking about writing as assessment in an AI-enabled world?
That's a great question.
Sorry, that was an unofficial sound effect. This is a hard question for everybody.
Well, I tell you what we have clearly identified. We have to look at we have to relook at how we assess student learning, and what student and how we assess outcomes and capabilities that we want to build. We shouldn't be testing on things that So, for instance, I grew up. I remember having to memorize the capitals of all 50 states. We all carry in our pockets, on our phones, more information than the Library of Congress contains. And that was not the case, 3 or 4 decades ago. And in this new information world, I think that we need to focus more on critical thinking, on problem solving, on collaboration, on inspired questions to ask. And I think AI can help facilitate some of those things. But if we're testing students the same way that we were 10 years ago, or if we're assessing students the same way we were 10 years ago, we're just wrong. So that answer probably says, hey, I'm right there with you that we have to figure that out. I don't know that we've got a great answer on that, but we've got teams looking.
I think there are principles though, and one principle, David A. Bednar, he is a senior leader of our church, a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and a former president at BYU Idaho. He spoke on this campus about uses of AI, and specifically talked about writing. And one of the principles he shared was that the ability to create something, to think through something, like you talked about, Troy, is a God-given power, so that we have. And if AI starts infringing on that and kind of take that away from us, and we're relying on AI more than we are that power, then we're not using that right. So I think understanding how to use it in those parameters where we are using that, and we're able, to think through things and create something, where it's not AI, where his example was, hey, I wrote this is Elder Bednar's example. I wrote this talk, but I asked the AI, like, what's the tone of this talk? And he used it to kind of help him that way. But it was clear that these are my words, these are my thoughts, this is my writing.
I've written a lot about this. before, because I think it's to President Meredith, your point, moving from outputs to inputs. Like the output can be created now easily with AI, 5 to 7 page paper. I can create that. In fact, I did a AI boot camp with a bunch of presidents, and I go through all these different AI programs and how you can like put them all together like puzzle pieces. And there was a student panel, and the student says, I wanted a scholarship, and I never wrote a single word. I just had AI, just ran it through different. And I thought, man, if we could capture how much thinking went into how to do that, that's the critical thinking. So the 5 to 7 page paper can be created now, but the prompts, the way I put these puzzle pieces together to get to something that I know can be created easily is where the learning happens, and how I assess it and interrogate it and think through it. And that's where it's just moving from outputs to inputs. And that's where the critical thinking is really taking place. We're thinking about how to create, how to beat something and hack it, which, and it's been that way for a long time. And now it's just becoming reality.
Yeah, and we've seen a little bit of that in the past, but just on a much smaller scale. Like a simple example is the calculator. When I grew up, you just had to memorize everything, and now my son goes in to take the ACT, and he takes a calculator with him, and I'm like, "Well, why are you taking
the formulas?"
Exactly. And so there's but AI is certainly a much more that's a bigger leap than the calculator ever was, but I do like the way you articulated that.
Yeah, think about. I've got a couple kids, young kids. When my daughter, and she's showing her, by the way, the hardest thing in the world is 5th and 6th grade math. And there's a certain point at which you, as an adult, you top out of elementary school math. And so she'll go, and I've told this story before in the podcast, Papa, how do you do this? And I'm like, I don't know, go ask your mom, go in the other room. And as soon as she does, I pick up my phone and I go to Perplexity and I go, how do I do this problem here? And she comes back in and I go, I figured it out. You have to write it on paper, do it the long way. But we're relying on AI for so many things. The question is how. I really, really, really like what you said about fences and roads, because so many we naturally wanted to build fences. There were very few people a year ago, 2 years ago, that went, boy, we could build this road that takes us to this new place. It was like, we need a fence. We need an ironclad iron rod with, what's the sharp stuff you put around a fence? I can't, razor wire. Yeah. We need razor wire on the fence and an iron gate with spikes on the side. Then we'll talk about roads. But it was, to your point, it's like, how do we think about guardrails, but also think about the possibility? And that's where I think we limit ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, one of the leaders of our church said that we need to be both realistic, or we can be realistic about both the opportunity and the challenge. And his encouragement was that we should neither be giddy nor alarmist. And I think one of the things that can help us with this, if we just constantly ask ourselves the question, how can we use AI to benefit the student? And there are just so many opportunities. But again, if you try to capture all the opportunities at once, you won't capture anything. And so that's why for us, we have been maniacally focused on enhancing learning, preparation for the workforce, and assisting with advising and mentoring and so on.
And all for the benefit of the student.
All for the student.
Yeah.
Well, we could, listen, my business background would probably point me to operations here and figure out how to use AI to, squeeze cost and eliminate headcount and do those things. And there's probably going to be a time for that. But if we're not putting the student first as we're thinking about how to use this technology going forward, then I think we're missing the boat.
I love that focus. And Joe, I actually like that distinction you made between inputs and outputs. The way that we typically speak about that is productivity-based AI and learning-based AI. And the productivity side, of course, is let's just get to a finished product. We're trying to produce content. We're trying to have some sort of output or outcome, like you said. But the learning process is all about the inputs that we're doing, that critical thinking, that struggle. And so I think making that distinction of here's an AI tool that's productivity based, more suited for the workforce, and here's an AI tool that preserves the learning process and supports students where they are. For example, our platform, when we look at the data in our pilot studies, 11 p.m. on a Sunday is the peak usage of getting formative feedback on writing. And so that's augmenting and supplementing campus resources, tutors, et cetera, and meeting students where they are with that immediacy, that 24/7 availability and available within seconds to get that feedback. That's AI for learning. AI for productivity would be more, help me write this paper and help me cognitively offload my thinking process into a large language model, and then I'll just turn it in. And we think that that's kind of doing damage to higher education. So that's kind of the distinction that we talk about.
I think one of the duties we feel about AI, as we're in that framework that President Meredith talked about, is the need to help our students see how to appropriately use it in the workforce. So not only the ability to use it and to be fluent in AI, but to be fluent in knowing how to appropriately use it. And I think, any from any school, from any job, I think that they'll stand out. People will stand out if they know. And again, it goes back to the fences and the roads. Like, know what the fences are, but at the same time be creative and know how to build those roads. And I just think that's going to be important for future jobs, both of those.
Yeah. And I think higher education has a responsibility to stimulate curiosity about AI. I was talking to a college president recently, and she was telling me that she's noticed that some of the recruiters that are coming onto campus are asking their students, how do you use AI in your personal life? And the takeaway from the question is those recruiters don't even know how AI is going to be used in their workforce today, and they certainly don't know how it's going to be used in the workforce 5 years from now. But what they were looking for is they were looking for people that were intellectually curious about AI, because it's going to evolve and change so much. And so I think if nothing else, we should leave our students with a craving to explore and understand the capabilities of AI, as well as, and going back to building fences, we do need to be mindful of helping them draw healthy boundaries. But that curiosity, I think, is going to be key for them going forward.
Yep. You've touched a couple of times on this concept of workforce preparation and alignment. I want to talk about that a little bit. So, the workforce is changing a lot, and AI has a big influence in that. And so, how are you best preparing your students for the workforce, and what initiatives do you have right now to align more with workforce demand so that you're preparing your students for after graduation?
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. One, our approach to learning and teaching is unique here. It certainly was unique compared to the experience I had in education growing up. I sit in I probably sit in classes every couple weeks. I just pop in on a teacher and I sit in the back and I observe. One of the things I've noticed here on campus is our teachers in a class probably speak about 40% of the time. And 60% of the time, they are engaging the students with questions, with inviting them to present, pushing them to take, move learning from, kind of knowledge to application. And so the feedback that we get from our graduates is they, compared to the peers that they're working with, they feel like the approach to learning here, because it's so hands-on, gives them a leg up in the workforce. So one of the things we talk about here is have them do in the classroom what they'll do someday in the workforce. So I think the approach to learning and teaching is part of that. The other is, you talk about how rapidly things are evolving. We've got to keep a pulse on industry. And so it's really important that we stay in touch with our alumni and constantly ask them, what skills and capabilities do we need to be developing in our students so they're helpful for you when you hire them? And I think, the deeper we get into this information age, the more some of these soft skills like collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, the more those things become really important to being successful in the workforce.
I got
Rob,
two
what would you
thoughts. I
say?
think
Yeah.
one thing is the profile of our faculty really help. A lot of our faculty have been there, done that. They've been in the industry. They've had an amazing career, and then they come back and want to teach. I mean, not all of them, but a lot. And they keep the connections. They keep the industry knowledge, and so they bring that into the classroom, and those connections to industry still continue that to be relevant as they go forward. And I think another thing that Matt that's helped, and again, the big lift is going to be, kind of that what President talked about, that learning model. But another lift is our activities model, where the students run most of our activities and get amazing leadership opportunities, that they are resume builders. I mean, so in and out of the class, they're getting opportunities to build real skills that are desired in the workforce. And I would even say the way we use student employees is similar. For example, the data and research team, institutional research, is in my area, and we're having students do amazing research and data analysis where they come and present it to the executive team, to that leadership group. And we're always clear to say, put this in your portfolio as you tell your story, as you're looking for a job. Use this as an example. Use me as a reference. I'd be happy to, things like that. So I think there's things happening inside and outside of the classroom that help.
Well, Troy, we're gonna try to wrap this one up because I've got two final questions for the guys. And before I get to those final two, I do want to ask you, Rob, because when we talked this morning, I asked you what it's like to be the chief of staff for President Meredith. You've got a lot to say. Do you want to repeat any of that now, or we're going to say that for another episode?
We better say that.
That was a total setup.
He's great to work with. I love it. It's been just a pleasure. It's going to be one of my, as I look back on my career, it's going to be one of the highlights where I just look back and just think of it with gratitude.
He knows we're doing year-end reviews right now.
I love throwing a couple curveballs out, but I have two final questions we ask every guest, and you guys can split them up or however you want to do it. Number one, what else do you want to say about BYU Idaho? Open mic, anything that you want to say, plug away. And number two, what do you see for the future of higher education?
Why don't you take the first one?
Okay. We've mentioned this before, but I feel I need to mention again our mission to develop disciples of Jesus Christ, who are leaders in their homes, the church, and the community. Everything we do connects to that. We talk about it often when proposals, when policies, whatever. How does that connect to our mission? But then we also, again, like we mentioned earlier, we have teaching-focused faculty that 100% focus on the students and their success. When you talk to our alumni and ask them what they remember and they're special, they always bring up the faculty and how helpful and meaningful those relationships were to them. We want to serve as many students. We want to realize the potential in everyone. We want to help people to that gateway that you talked about, Joe. We want real world preparation, high value education. And by the way, this is a fun place to be. It's just like alive. You come here and feel that. And so when we talked about that brand gap, that's the reality. And I think we're doing a better job at telling that story and leaning into things that you asked about earlier. But it really is a special place that is making a difference in many people's lives. I don't know.
I think that's a great answer about BYU Idaho. I'll tell you what my hope for higher education is. My hope is that we don't let good things get in the way of the best things. There are so many good things in higher education, research, on and on. But I would say research is kind of at the top of the list. But we should never let research get in the way of what is best for the student. We will all be better served if we are very intent on identifying things that will help us develop the whole person in the student. And some of that happens in the classroom, some of it happens in activities on campus like Rob referred to, but my hope for higher education is we'll get more focused on what's best for the student.
What a great way to end it. And I do have to ask one final question. That's for President Meredith and to Rob. On a scale of 0 to 100, how was Troy's first co-hosting experience? What score would you give him?
I give him 100.
Easy.
Yeah.
100%.
Big
Easy.
fan of Troy.
100%. 100%.
Troy, well done, my friend. What did you think of this conversation?
This is great. Yeah. And look, I grew up knowing Rick's college and just down, a few hours down the road on I-15 from this institution. So very familiar with the mission and the work. And so this was a really fulfilling discussion today.
Thanks, Troy.
There you have it, everybody. I'm going to outro them in the best possible way I can. Chief of Staff Rob Garrett and President Alvin Meredith III of BYU, Idaho. And you've just EdUp'd.
Leaders in higher education, when it comes to scaled student support, stop guessing. Studiosity is globally trusted, used by educators for 20 years to build critical thinking and ownership amongst all students at scale. Studiosity is designed just for colleges, not for consumers, and it comes with a proven 4.4x return on retention. It's writing feedback, it's infrastructure for your whole college, and it won't give corrections, because it encourages learning and empowers educators with insight into that learning. It's time for AI to ethically serve the mission of American schools. Ask for your free demo at studiosity.com/ace. Raise your standards for AI in education and protect the value of your degrees with Studiosity.